But in the various reports of that telescope, they indicated that our planet is the only planet that they've been able to find anywhere in the universe that has life like our lives. Many of the reports, it's a mystery. It's a vast universe. They have mapped 200 images of 200 million images of galaxies for the internet. As one illustration. You are utterly and completely unique, both in your similarity to the whole human race and then in your uniqueness. And we human beings haven't yet discovered the potential of the powers of being alive. We're too busy making money. We're too busy fighting wars. We're too busy bullying, competing. But the untapped capacity of life, potential of life in you, is still unknown. So I want to begin by simply saying, take a hold of your life. Explore who you are and what you are. Make the choices deliberately. You have power in you, in life, such as you have never imagined. So don't play with your life. You 8th graders, the next 15 or 20 years you may be trying to shape who am I? What am I? What am I trying to be? What am I trying to do? You may be shaping. You will have power to shape your own decision making as you become who you are and who you're trying to become. To be what you are and capable of becoming what you are becoming is the sole purpose of life. So I want simply to put that on you. To do the business, do the homework of your life.
Reverend Lawson, thank you so much for that. I hate to take us back to the problems in society, but I read a quote of yours where you talked about how the evil of racism was it denied people their personhood. It denied their individuality and who they were as a person. Can you expand on that?
Just how the human race got off on the wrong foot, I don't know. But in the United States, there are 4 major issues that influence public policy and personal behavior. Those issues are, from my own work, sexism. Some scholars say that the effort to make women the weakest sex is the oldest human oppression. But sexism, racism, violence. The American people own 410 million guns, and we think that a gun will protect us. In fact, it doesn't, because the major cause of death on young children in the United States is the gun. Now, what I say to you, I have researched for decades, and you can go and research that. I wish you would. The gun in the last year has become the major death instrument for children under 16. So look that up. It's been in the Los Angeles Times when we had these 3 killings within about 10, when we had these 3 mass killings in about 10 days in Monterey Bay, Goshen, and Half Moon Bay up near San Francisco. There were a lot of talk in the press about the mass guns, the mass killings. And in the press was often that word that in 2022, the gun became the major killer of children under 15 in the United States, under 15 or 16. So research me if you want to, that would be helpful for you.
Well, Reverend Lawson, you bring up these issues, and yet for people like the people here, we can sometimes get overwhelmed and feel like, well, what can we do?
Well, okay,
How do we change?
I don't want you to get overwhelmed because there's a kind of conversation in the United States that is irrelevant to change. At 4 years of age in Ohio, I was called racist epithets. Massillon, Ohio, a good city to grow up in. It was a neighborhood boy. He lived in the same block, a white boy. I turned around and struck him. He was a playmate.
So much for that nonviolence,
I tried to hit him, yes, 4 years old. I knew he was wrong. I was not allowed to use language to bully people, to intimidate people as a boy. That's how I began recognizing that I was a human being and that I would not allow racism in my presence and that I would fight it all my life. It would stop. So I have fought racism, sexism, anti-Semitism, bullying other people all my life. I have fought this. I've been in jails in LA and Washington, D.C., Orlando, Florida, and Mississippi, and Kentucky, and Tennessee, in all sections of this country over the issues of you are a human being and you should be treated as a person of dignity and grace and beauty. And any mistreatment of you as a person is the greatest evil that goes on in our society. And the remedy is to not fight all of the evil. The remedy is to begin by making certain you as a person will treat everyone else, including yourself, with grace and with mystery and with a sense of your humanity that you belong to life. I said earlier, I think, that when they put the Webb telescope in space a year ago now, the scientists said they were puzzled because in this big universe, our planet Earth is the only planet that they can find human life on it like we know it. They find life. Some of the biologists say there's been 50 billion living species on Earth over its long million years of existence. They find such life nowhere else. None of the space voyagers have found anything. None of the telescopes can find life like you have anywhere in space. So each of us is quite distinctively a human being, and each of us can see to it, therefore, that we not only learn to care about our own life, but in the process, we therefore learn to care about everybody else's life. And that's the beginning. The movement that I helped to create and organize was a movement that taught people over and over again, you are somebody. The sanitation workers' strike in Memphis in 1968, which produced the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., the working garbage workers adopted the motto from our teaching, I am a man, I am a person. I should be treated with full dignity. Well, anyway, that's what the movement is about, and you can create many movements where you are for the ending of bullying, the ending of mistreatment of people, and for growing your own sense of what it is to be alive, what it is to be human.
So if I hear correctly, your advice is, number one, it's to appreciate who you are as a person.
Exactly, yeah. Accept yourself. You have a gift from creation. Accept it. Discover it. Explore it. You are a mystery. You yourself know that at times you behave or think or act in ways that you don't fully understand. Well, at 94, I'm still something of a mystery to myself, so I'm still learning.
And as you face the challenges you faced when you were a young man, which dealt with Jim Crow and the discrimination, the rampant discrimination across our country, your solution, if I heard correctly, was one, first to empower yourself, and then two, to empower others and organize others around you?
Yeah, and then empower your own life, win your own life, enjoy trying to be alive, trying to be a lover of human life, beginning with your own life. And then organize with family, with friends, with neighbors, for the purpose of helping the world catch up with you. Break down the things that hurt and try to create where we can movements. When you speak of the civil rights movement, recognize that you're talking about a vast enterprise. I've not found the book that satisfies me about the human rights, the civil rights movement. So anyway, well, I think you get the point. Then you organizing others, begin with your immediate friends, your family, your union, your congregation, your social club, your neighborhood club, and spend your life in addition to making a living and having a vocation and a career and all of that. Let your career help you create truth and justice and beauty. I'll say it boldly, do not let your career become a moneymaker first. Let your career become a character making, your character, your common sense, your wisdom, your neighborhood, your family. Making your life the most important part of what you do. A life that you can have confidence in, a life that you can care about, a life that you know makes contributions to loving and living and playing and working. And in large measure, that's what Martin King was about, incidentally.
What do you mean? Please explain.
Well, Martin King was a joyful man who loved to play, who loved to joke. We, in many of our meetings, we played touch football in the afternoon. We played basketball. We went swimming. We went walking. He and I, on more than one occasion, because we had stuff that we needed to talk about with each other, on more than one occasion, he and I went off walking in the forest along the seashore in the South Carolina and Georgia. Went for long walks as we talked about ourselves and our movement and our struggle. So it wasn't just what you've seen in the papers or television. It was a lot of planning and thinking and all. So,
and if I hear correctly, there was still time for play. There was still time for relaxing.
I mean, some of the best shrimp I have still ever eaten. There's a little hole-in-the-wall restaurant near the Penn Center. The Penn Center is still a center where people go for a retreat and for youth conferences and student conferences and for planning meetings and strategy meetings of many different kinds. And so it's still there, and it's still.
In what state is that?
Hmm?
In what state is it?
Penn Center is in South Carolina. In fact, I've been trying to arrange an institute on nonviolent struggle at Penn Center again. But that's one of the places where the movement had them very often. That is, the Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks movement often had meetings at Penn Center. And just outside Penn Center were small businesses and restaurants, and the shrimp on that seacoast is the best shrimp I have yet to eat in my lifetime.
So who knew that you would get a lunch recommendation at this lecture? It's
Okay, what questions do you have? What would you like to ask?
Yeah, let's open it up. Would anyone
Let's
like
see
to ask some questions?
What you want to say.
We have microphones up here.
You can come on up.
So come on up and
Come on up, Carla. You guys want to
be
come up?
close to the mic if you have things you want to ask about.
How do you create change?
Okay, now you have to
Yeah,
speak
okay,
into the
okay.
mic. And you have to,
And
you
introduce
need
you.
to
Okay,
take
go
your
for it.
mask off.
You can take off your mask. Yeah.
So how do you create change?
Now
in-
remember, you're speaking to them as well as addressing the question to me. Yeah, so.
How do you create change in polarized political environments like there are right now?
That's mine.
Great question.
All right, if I hear you correctly, you're asking this huge question about a polarized society, right? And the political question.
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, your task is for you not to be polarized. It's for you to grow as a singularly loving, thinking, talking human being who's trying to tap, and nobody else knows how to do this except you, who's trying to tap the gift of life and exploit its powers. That's in my mind, that's our single major work. The polarization is because our nation, our governors, our presidents, our mayors, our Congress have never tried to help the American people learn that this nation was organized on a humanistic principle. At one point, in the settlement of this country by people from Europe, the 13 colonies agreed. How that happened, I don't know. I have to tell you that. It's mystery to me. But the 13 colonies agreed to this principle. We hold these truths to be self-evident. That means every human being can see it for themselves, if they will. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all are created equal, and that all are created by the Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's the Declaration of Independence. If you don't know it, and you expect to vote and to live in the United States, you ought to learn that preamble. Because the 13 colonies on July 4th, 1776 declared, "This is our creed. We will not become a nation under the authority of King George," I think it was. I'm not sure. Was it George?
I think it was George.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
"We will not become a nation under the governance of King George of England. We will be a free people." July 4th, 1776 is when they announced their 13 colony unity around that piece of poetry. One of the big mistakes, and I'm going to be crude, one of the big mistakes that white men who governed our country for the first 300 years made is they failed to teach that piece of poetry, the preamble of the Declaration of Independence. I heavily push this on you because it says you're equal, you have a gift given by creation, and that you can make of your life what you want to make of it. Which this latter thing I said can be true, but it can be very wrong. Because violence and sexism, economic injustice and oppression can keep you from breaking through. So there are powers that will stop you. And in our country, racism and slavery and racism, sexism, violence, and what I call plantation capitalism are the four great spiritual forces of evil in the United States that hurt too many people. I said racism, sexism, violence, plantation capitalism. When I say sexism, I include all the issues that you can find across our country about gender and women, men, transgender, gay, lesbian people. All those struggles are struggles that have to be done. They should not have to be done because Congress and presidents and the governors and the mayors and the city council people ought to know that securing the rights of all the people who live in their jurisdictions ought to be the first task. See to it that police do not kill people who are not doing anything wrong. Police do not stop folk for traffic violations and then they end up dead. That ought to be the first task of every mayor, every city councilman, every governor, Congress. And of course, the fact that the presidents of both political parties play such games, although the Democrats do not play the same games. But the political parties are responsible for not doing what is their job. So I'll say that very boldly. And we, the people, need to organize again and again.
So in response to the question.
And that's what the movement was about. The movement was about reorganizing ourselves with one another in such a way that we could break the chains of hurt and brokenness, of bad wages, for an example, which is still a big battle in the United States, and we can help people gain a better quality of life.
So you're saying it all goes back to the Declaration of
Beg pardon?
You're saying it all goes back to the Declaration of Independence and that principle that everyone is created equal and everyone should be treated the same.
Yeah, absolutely. For Martin King and myself and many of us, the Declaration of Independence was, along with the example of Jesus as a great teacher, the two big forces that help us define why we were in the struggle, why we thought we had to carry on the struggle, because I have not really yet stopped.
We can see that.
I'm still working at it.
Thank you for the question. Did you have a question?
What,
You may.
what do you think causes people to be racist or sexist? What do you think causes people to dehumanize each other?
So if you could hear the question in the back, the question is, what do you think is the cause of racism, sexism, and that causes some people to try and dehumanize others?
That's a profound question, and I'm not sure I can even give a hint to it. But I do happen to think that two forces have shaped the world more than necessary. One force has been male domination, and the second force has been the use of violence. So there are scholars who explore the business of where these things come from. I've not done that much work because I'm at all on it. But it seems to me that male domination and violence have been the two forces that have organized the world more than any other forces.
And so it sounds to me like maybe the solution, as you just reiterated a minute ago, is to never forget that everyone is created equal. Everyone deserves the human dignity.
Well, you have to have a strong motivation that your life really is sacred. It matters. That your task as a human being living is to secure that life, not in the sense of money and guns, but in the sense of inwardness, so that you know who you are and you know that your life matters no matter what goes on, and you're not going to give up your responsibility to be alive and to walk your journey in ways that are helpful and wise and loving, most of all loving. So the Rosa Parks Martin King movement, and I'm using the language from within the movement. The civil rights movement is the term that can be applied to a great variety of campaigns. And as you move into high school, if you want to read about an outstanding campaign in the movement, read about the Little Rock Nine. I know all 9 of them. I buried one of them in his sudden death about 10 years ago, Jefferson Thomas. I went in and out of Little Rock, so I knew all 9. I know them now. I've talked in the last year to Ernie Green and to Minnie Brown, who lives up in Vancouver. I've seen Minnie Brown in the last year. So I went in and out of the Little Rock 9 at Little Rock, Arkansas in '58 very often, and knew their parents, knew their ministers, knew them very well, helped them to organize their minds to do what they were able to do. school or now can read stories about that. They're your age. You find it extraordinary.
Do we have another question? Thank you.
All right, let's see if we can get as many of these questions as possible.
Go ahead.
Why don't you go ahead?
Now speak up.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I talk too much. so
Go.
you have to shut me up.
I realize that when people talk about change in the world, I realize that there's a focus on what's happening now, and there's a focus on what's yet to come. So you personally, do you feel like you think more about one than the other, or do you feel like both of those ideas and mindsets are just as important?
So her question was that sometimes people think about conditions as they are right now versus what's going to happen in the future. And what do you focus on? Do you focus on the end goal, or do you focus on the problems that
No, I focus on living today. Because how I live today helps to determine what goes on tomorrow or next week. So no, you have to focus. But a couple of things. One is you need to know about what went on before you so that you don't make the same mistakes that folk made yesterday. So that you can build your life to the best of your ability on not making the mistakes of the human beings of the past. That's hard to do, but it's, you know enough about the past, don't repeat the wrong of the past today. And tomorrow takes care of itself. It's according to the way in which you live today.
Thank you. Great question.
Good morning, Reverend Lawson. First, my heart is full of gratitude for your life of sacrifice and service. Thank you, sir. My question is, what are your thoughts on cancel culture? You've talked about anti-Semitism and racism and sexism, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are in terms of punishments for those who may have those thoughts or commit acts in those areas being
You
canceled.
said cancer culture?
Cancel culture.
Yeah.
I guess the idea that someone says, oh, you said something inappropriate, or you did something inappropriate, therefore you shouldn't be able to speak or hold a job or whatever it may be.
I have had across the years a number of surgeries. I've been very grateful that I've had doctors from an early age 14 in fact, who have told me what's going on in my body that I needed to correct. And so with surgery and doctor's care and my obeying, I got well. Cancer culture seems to me to be an effort to get people not to face a diagnosis that enables them to live better as human beings than they ever thought possible. Racism, sexism, violence, plantation capitalism wants to maintain control of this 330 million people. So the Trump forces are bringing together all of the forces of spiritual wickedness that has hurt people in the past. The Trump coming together is an effort to restore the powers of those evils. This is not to say that those evils have now suddenly disappeared, but we, the people of the USA, we, the people of the United States of America, have made progress. The movement that you saw symbols of here on the back wall started the process of desegregation in the United States. While desegregation has meant in many ways white-black. In California, we had not only the hostility to black people, but to Chinese and Japanese, and especially the Mexican Americans. Heavy anti-Semitism in San Clemente, California. You had signs on the outskirts of the town that said, "No Jew, no Negro." This was in the 60s. In Glendale, you had a sign on the outside of the limits that said, "No Negro should allow the sun to set on him in Glendale." There were restaurants in LA that would not serve a Negro or a Mexican American or a Japanese person. There were no signs. In Nashville, Tennessee, there were signs that said white only, no colored. But in California, in Los Angeles, there are no such signs, except that the Bullock Tea Room back in the 50s would not serve a person of color. Bullock Tea Room was a major eating place on Wilshire Boulevard. It is now a law school.
Oh, at Southwestern Law School? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's now a law school.
Yeah.
I've forgotten the name.
Yeah, it's Southwestern Law School, yes.
Yeah, I think it is, Southwestern Law School. Yeah, but then it was a big department store, and they would not serve people of color in that department store. So does that help to get at that question? Yeah.
Go ahead, your question.
My question was, how do you harbor courage to fight for change and to speak up and make your point so that change can happen?
If you couldn't hear it in the back, the question was, how do you harbor courage to speak up and to stand up and to seek justice? Am I summarizing it?
Yeah.
Close enough? Thank you.
How do you learn to speak up? Well, you do it with your best friends. You learn to talk with your best friends. And you learn to have some of these discussions. If you see an instance of bullying in your school, your class, then talk it over with your family. Talk it over with your best friends in the school. Not 25 or 30 people, but one person, 2 people, 3 people. Folk at home. So that's how you begin, by talking in the circles of people who you know love you and care about you. And then allow that place for character and courage to ferment in you and take place in you, so that that then will strengthen you for the other stages of your life. Every human being has the stuff of life in them that will enable them to endure more than what any of us knows. You can read lots of biographies nowadays of all kinds of people who have had great pain inflicted on them, but came out of it with wisdom and healing and courage. So we haven't begun to tap the levels of courage that we human beings can have. But it's there. It's great potential.
You almost make it sound, in response to the question, like it's an exercise to reinforce your own dignity with your friends and the loved ones around you.
I will say without reservation that one of the benefits of doing homework and to do it well is you do the homework that your life requires. I'm very grateful for that school homework assignments taught me how to do assignments outside of school. And do assignments that I felt my life needed, that was not assigned by any teacher or book, but assigned in my own journey.
Thank you. So we have another question. Thank you for the question.
My question is, how do you think the internet has affected the civil rights movement and society as a whole?
So the question, if you could hear it in the back, is what do you think the impact is of the internet on the civil rights and even on society as a whole?
The internet has been a disaster for democracy in the United States.
Preach.
I'll say that plainly, boldly. It's a disaster. The main way in which it's been a disaster is it has allowed all sorts of Trump-like little groups in California, there are many of them, who are on internet and spreading their cancer around through the internet. And it's another case where Congress and governors, state legislatures and presidents need to bring technology under the control of the Declaration of Independence.
Thank you. Great question.
Otherwise, we're going to destroy our country.
So you feel that the internet plays a big part in helping to create the polarization and divisiveness in our society?
Well, I have, as one of my areas of work as a pastor, I have studied evangelical Christianity in the United States, and I still study it. The radio and the internet has given evangelical religion in the United States a platform in which in the Republican Party, 23% of their vote nationally is a vote of evangelical people. Those evangelical people are wrong. They lie about Jesus. They lie about the Bible, the Jewish Bible, and the Christian Bible. Do they lie deliberately? I'm not sure about that. They lie because they've been taught the lie. I've known that since my high school days in the field of religion. I had evangelicals who tried to convert me. And so there is in my black religious tradition, we don't speak of the gospel of Jesus, we speak of the religion of Jesus. And that started over 100 years in the United States. We don't speak of the Gospel of Mark, we speak of the book of Mark. And we study them as books of the ancient world that tell us more than what we can know, but are not to be interpreted as the way some Christians do so. Let me give you an illustration. I continue to study Jesus as a great teacher. Nowhere does Jesus say in the 4 books, Mary, Mary was one of his best friends. Mary of Magdalene was one of Jesus' best friends. Now, 2,000 years ago, because he died about the year 30 of the very first century of this era. He never said to anybody, I am going to die for your sins. Now, if some of you are members of churches, you go and find the books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Those are the 4 books about Jesus. Jesus is one of the only people in human history that had 4 books written about him from the ancient world. Nowhere does Jesus say, I'm going to die for your sins. Now, if you're a baptized person, don't you believe me? You go and look at those books yourself. There are lots and lots of very fine English translations from the Greek. Go look at the book yourself. Nowhere does Jesus say, Peter or Mary, or does he say to a crowd of people, I am going to die for your sins. The cross was an instrument of capital punishment by the Roman Empire. It was preserved only for those who Rome called a criminal. And a criminal was a person who denied that Caesar was the Son of God or had some other religious perspective. I challenge you, 8th graders, if you're a baptized person from the church, don't believe what I said, go read the books yourself. Nowhere in those books, and I quote them personally for meditation. I read them regularly over and over again all my life. I am a Jesus freak in the sense that Jesus has a major number of books in my library that I've read from the ancient world to the present world. Nowhere does Jesus say to anybody, I am going to die for your sins.
I'm certainly not going to disagree with you, Reverend. I'm certainly not going to disagree with your knowledge. I appreciate it. Thank you.
And I'm a pastor, and so I'm not ridiculing the church, but I'm simply saying that many churches, many Christian people make many mistakes in what they tell you today is true about Jesus.
Thank you. Did we have another question?
What led you to move to Los Angeles? Like, why did you feel like not why did you feel like you had to, but why did you move to Los Angeles, and what did you think about it when you first moved here?
So the question is, why did you relocate to Los Angeles, and what drew you here, and what
Because
your thoughts?
in my denomination, the United Methodist Church, we have bishops, and bishops appoint people to a local congregation. And I had a bishop of Los Angeles back in the 60s who was a good friend, and he convinced me to come and be the pastor at Holman United Methodist Church. So I left Memphis to come to LA to take that church as a pastor. And it was the right decision to make. It was a hard decision, but it was a true decision.
Well, we're certainly grateful that you made that move.
Out of all of Gandhi's principles of nonviolence, which did you find to be the one you liked most or the most important?
So which was the most of Gandhi's principles of nonviolence, what did you find to be the most important or the most salient of all of those principles?
Gandhi became a practitioner of nonviolence because as a very young man, he decided that he could not do evil to change evil. You cannot overcome evil with more evil. Gandhi said, well, Gandhi read Jesus, and I'll tell you the very specific things that he read. He read the book of Mark, chapters 5, 6, 7. In that section, Jesus says you have to live by a standard of God, and that you cannot overcome evil with evil. You must overcome evil with good. That is an ancient principle in the Jewish Bible, and it's in a lot of the poetry of other world religions. And as Gandhi came to think about it as a young adult, he said, if you do an eye for an eye, very soon everyone's going to be blind. No one's going to see. So, Jesus, and that's what Jesus has said. So Gandhi took that to heart as a part of how he understood Hindu scriptures and said that nonviolence is the way. And when he adopted nonviolence, I'm going to say this as a teacher because it's important. Nonviolence is not putting together the English non and the English word violence. As Gandhi called it, nonviolence is a translation from Gandhi of an ancient word that comes somewhere 600 years before Jesus of Nazareth. Gandhi took an ancient Sanskrit word, ahimsa, A-H-I-M-S-A, and he translated that word in his mother's religion meant do no harm. Life is sacred. Don't harm life in any way. Do no injury. So Gandhi took that ancient word ahimsa and translated it in nonviolence. And it has no hyphen in it. And Gandhi said the non is not a negative. The non is not an English negative. The non is positive love, positive truth. So that's hard for us people in the West to understand. This Indian man, student as he was, insisting upon making us, in a sense, twist some of our logic. The word nonviolence does not come from the English. It comes from Gandhi at least 100 years ago, somewhere around, we do not know exactly when, but somewhere around 1909, 1910, Gandhi invented the word nonviolence as one word.
It's a much
So it
richer.
doesn't come from law. It doesn't come from court. Nonviolent crimes, nonviolent felony.
It's a much more positive view.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
It's just the absence of violence.
Yeah, that's right. So it's, beg pardon?
It's a much more positive view than the absence of violence. It's a positive view of doing something that's just and right.
Yeah, doing the beautiful, doing the loving, doing the right thing, doing the just, the courageous, bold thing. That's Gandhi's view of it.
Thank you. Great question. Do we have another question?
when Gandhi said that you have to fight evil with good, can you give us some advice on what good we can help with, or you can help us with, for when we are older and we need to fight the evil?
So his question is, as a young man, as a young person here today, Gandhi talks about using, positive nonviolence to fight evil. How should they take it? Where should they go? What do they do when they go out into this world? How do they go about implementing that Gandhian view?
Well, as a young person, I think you have to experiment now. You can't wait till this is the world, this school, and every school is a part of the world. So don't wait till you think you get out in the world. Experiment with each other by treating each other with dignity, and fight back against any bullying, whether you experience it or somebody else experiences it. Fight back against every bullying. Here at home, on your block where you live, in the school. Learn, practice it now. And as you practice it now, you will be surprised. You'll be astonished how your own life is transformed in terms of courage, and how also your sight in seeing bullying, anti-Semitism, sexism, most of all, racism, violent language, someone mistreating another person. Practice it in the 8th grade. At this age, and talk about it in your family, in your household, with your best friends. Talk about it in the classroom. Don't, as you go through high school, have a class on biology without talking about, is the human species built to be violent? There's some people who say yes to that. Talk about it. Put it in the classroom table and research and examine it. Write papers about it.
Thank you. Great question.
Yeah.
Do you believe that today's government, like their opinions, do you believe that today's government holds people back from fighting, like with the civil rights movement and other movements?
So I guess if I can rephrase the question is, do you believe that the government at times actually is an impediment, or slows down the positive movement of the civil rights and human dignity? Do you think that government at times is actually an impediment to improving human dignity and civil rights? Do you think it's a problem sometimes, the way government is run and the way?
Well, you should know, okay. Let me start over. That's a very tough question. I think that the Republican Party today is a horror. Many of our fellow Americans are people who have a whole H-O-L-E down the middle of their soul, which means that they have allowed their gift of life to be dehumanized. Now I did not invent that metaphor. That metaphor I discovered some years ago in a Western movie called Tombstone. The movie Tombstone did not come from a novel or a book. It was a screenplay written and comes from that screenplay. It's very. But Doc Holliday, a legendary figure of the West, California, Arizona, New Mexico. Doc Holliday says that some of his enemies who were trying to kill him, I don't remember if he calls them enemies, they were cowboys in southeast Arizona. They were cowboys, and some of them were criminal. They were rustlers of cattle and stage robbers and whatnot. So Doc Holliday, in a conversation with Wyatt Earp in that screenplay, says that these enemy cowboys are people with a hole down the middle of their soul. So you can get hold of the screenplay, but there's no book on it, but it's in the movie Tombstone. Now, what I think he meant by that, and it's a good metaphor, that some human beings allow their humanity to be chipped out of their lives. So they do not operate from the inner being which they love. They do not operate out of the powers of love and truth, of beauty. They operate in a conventional fashion. And I would say to you that so many million of our Americans have allowed sexism, racism, violence, and plantation capitalism to create a gaping emptiness on the inside of themselves. And this has become very problematic.
You raised a question about politics, and I want to just bring up a story that you told me on the way over here today about how politics can also be positive. You talked about Dolores Huerta and what she did in Los Angeles to help move our local politics to a more positive direction. Can you just briefly tell us about that?
Well, Los Angeles, California, have become more loving places for millions of people because of the work many of us have done in organizing poor people into unions and working with congregations, religious congregations, hand in hand also has been a very, very powerful thing. We have an organization, for example, in Los Angeles called Lay People, let's see, Clergy and Laity United for Economic Justice. It is a nonprofit that works on the issues of economic justice in our city and county, and in Orange County now, and in San Diego County now. So that's an illustration of what can be done. We can build nonprofits to do some of this organizing that we need to do.
So we only have a minute or two left, but I just wanted to leave. Reverend Lawson, as I heard it correctly, your general advice to everyone was, one, find yourself, find the humanity within, listen to that voice, and then to organize, even if it's just on an individual scale, with your friends and your loved ones.
Yeah, do your homework. Do your homework as a human being.
I'm sure the teachers and principals appreciate that.
Not just learn literature, but do the homework you have to do about watching and having insight about yourself and about others. Learn the powers of love and truth and beauty. And for me, in junior high school, I would accept no nonsense about racism. I would accept no nonsense about anti-Semitism. I would accept no nonsense about mistreating girls as sexualizing them rather than humanizing them. And even in high school as a boy, I wouldn't listen to the dirty stories that were sexist stories. I walked away. I didn't know what I was doing, except that I had 5 older sisters, so I was not going to do that junk about women. So my sisters protected me. So anyway, practice where you are, becoming a human being and being a human being in your relationships. You can recognize bullying, racism, sexism, anti-Semitism. You can recognize mistreatment of people who may be a transgender or whatnot. And don't participate in that junk against people. You have to have a kind of a negative. In junior high, the issue of racism and anti-Semitism were very strong with me. By the time I was in high school, I was not going to discriminate against anyone because of religion or race or sex or gender. So learn to see mistreatment of yourself and others. And learn not to do it yourself, and learn to resist it. If you cannot resist it openly, then quietly resist it until you can do so. But practice in your family, and my family was a talking family, so every meal we were always talking and listening to music. So that was very helpful to me as well. So you can do it in your family. If you can't, make your family help you do it.
Reverend Lawson,
Yeah.
this has been our pleasure, but unfortunately the kids have to get back to the next class.
Right. Yeah.
So can we please have